My grandfather stood slowly from his chair, lifting his glass as the soft candlelight flickered across his face. What was supposed to be a warm birthday celebration turned into something else entirely when he spoke. "Claire," he said calmly, his voice steady but carrying weight. "Tell us how you've used your trust fund over the last 25 years. At first, no one reacted. The laughter that had filled the private dining room faded mid-breath. Silverware hovered in midair. Conversations froze. My heart began pounding so loudly I was certain everyone could hear it. I swallowed. "I don't know what you mean," I said quietly. "I never received a trust fund." The silence that followed wasn't ordinary silence. It was heavy, suffocating. Grandpa's expression changed instantly. His warm smile faded, replaced by something colder, something concerned. And in that moment, I noticed something even stranger. My mother wouldn't look at me. My father stared down at the table, and for the first time in my life, I realized something was very, very wrong. "My name is Claire Monroe. I was 28 years old that night, and for most of my life, I had learned how to survive by being invisible. Being the quiet daughter had always been easier. Quiet daughters didn't cause problems. Quiet daughters didn't disrupt the illusion. And in my family, illusion was everything. I lived in a small apartment in Seattle with my roommate Jade. She worked long shifts at a cafe nearby and always came home smelling like coffee beans and vanilla syrup. She was the only person who truly saw my life for what it was. Late nights hunched over my laptop, freelance UX projects, unpredictable income, constant budgeting, survival. Meanwhile, across the lake, my parents lived in a beautiful home in Bellevue. The kind of home people admired. Perfect lawn, perfect decorations, perfect image. Inside that perfect home lived my mother Elaine, a woman who valued reputation more than truth. My father, Daniel, quiet, passive, always choosing comfort over confrontation, and my younger sister Lily, the one who never had to struggle for anything. Growing up, Lily received everything: private school tuition, vacations across Europe, a fully paid apartment, support without question. I received something else: lessons about independence. When I struggled financially, my parents didn't help. They called it character building. When my car broke down and I asked for help, my mother said, "You're an adult. You'll figure it out." So I did, alone. Still, I kept showing up to family events, birthdays, holidays, dinners like this one, because a small part of me still hoped that someday I would feel like I belonged. That night, the restaurant glowed with golden light. Everything was elegant, controlled, staged. My mother adjusted Lily's hair gently when she arrived. She barely acknowledged me. Dinner continued like always. Lily talked excitedly about her latest trip. My mother smiled proudly. My father nodded quietly, and my grandfather watched. He wasn't smiling. He was observing, waiting. I didn't realize it then, but he had already uncovered something. Something that would destroy everything I thought I knew. Something that would expose a lie buried for 25 years. Because when he asked about that trust fund, he wasn't asking casually. He already knew the answer. And so did someone else sitting at that table. They just didn't know yet that the truth was about to find them. But what happened the next morning in my grandfather's office would prove that this birthday wasn't the beginning of the story. It was the beginning of the end. I barely remember leaving the restaurant that night. The cold air outside hit my face sharply, but it didn't ground me. Nothing could. My mind kept replaying my grandfather's words over and over. Trust fund, 25 years, $3 million. It didn't make sense. I drove home in silence, my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. My phone buzzed once on the passenger seat. "Jade," I answered without speaking. "How was dinner?" she asked gently. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. She waited. "Claire," she said again, softer this time. "I think," I whispered, my voice cracking. I think something was stolen from me. She didn't ask questions. She didn't push. She simply said, "Come home." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, Seattle was covered in fog. The city looked quieter than usual, like it was holding its breath. I took the early bus downtown, watching strangers move through their routines, unaware that my entire life had shifted overnight. My grandfather's office sat inside a tall glass building overlooking the water. I had only been there a few times as a child. Back then, it had felt enormous and important. Now it felt intimidating. The receptionist greeted me with a polite nod and guided me inside. Grandpa was waiting. He sat in a leather chair near the window, a thick folder resting on his lap. His posture was straight, but his face looked older than I remembered. Not weaker, just disappointed. He didn't waste time. "I created a trust fund for you when you were 3 years old," he said. His voice was calm, but firm. $3 million. It was meant to protect you, to give you freedom, to make sure you never had to struggle. My chest tightened. You were supposed to gain access to it when you turned 18. 18. That number hit me harder than anything else. At 18, I had worked part-time at a grocery store just to afford basic expenses. I had skipped meals to save money. I had watched my sister travel the world while I stayed behind. I had believed that was simply my reality. "You mean," I said slowly, "it was always there?" He nodded. "Lass." My hands began to shake. "Then why didn't I know about it?" He looked down at the folder. Then he handed it to me. "Because someone made sure you didn't." The folder felt heavier than it should have. Inside were pages filled with numbers, signatures, and transaction records. Withdrawals, transfers, payments, dozens of them, hundreds. My eyes scanned the pages, trying to understand what I was seeing. Mortgage payments, home renovations, luxury purchases, tuition payments, apartment rent. None of it had gone to me. Every signature at the bottom of those documents belonged to the same two people: Elaine Monroe, Daniel Monroe. My parents. I stopped breathing. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't a mistake. It was intentional. Every time I had struggled, every time I had asked for help, every time I had been told no, they had known. They hadn't been unable to help me. They had chosen not to, because they were already using my money. A deep, burning anger rose inside my chest, mixing with something even worse: betrayal. "They took it," I whispered. Grandpa's jaw tightened. "Yes." The word hung heavily between us. "They were entrusted to manage it," he continued, "not spend it." I stared at the signatures again. My mother's neat handwriting. My father's careful approval. 25 years of decisions made behind my back. 25 years of lies. I looked up at him. "What happens now?" His eyes met mine, steady and unwavering. "That," he said, "depends on how far you're willing to go." For the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the truth. I was afraid of what I might become once. I stopped protecting the people who had never protected me. Because the next step wouldn't just expose what they did, it would force them to face me. And they had no idea what was coming. I didn't sleep the night before the meeting. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the signatures, my mother's, my father's, over and over again, stamped across pages that were supposed to protect my future. By morning, the shock had settled into something colder: clarity. I dressed carefully, not to impress anyone, but to remind myself who I was. Someone who had survived without help, someone who had earned every inch of her independence. Before I left, Jade stood in the doorway of our apartment, studying me. "You look different," she said. I paused. "Different how?" She smiled faintly. "Stronger." I didn't know if that was true yet, but I wanted it to be. My grandfather had scheduled the meeting for noon in his office conference room. Neutral territory, professional, documented, permanent. When I arrived, his lawyer, Mr. Collins, was already there. He stood near the long wooden table, organizing papers into precise stacks. He nodded when he saw me. "They'll be here soon," he said. I didn't ask who. I already knew. Grandpa sat at the head of the table. When he saw me, he reached out and squeezed my hand briefly. "You're not alone," he said quietly. For once, I believed him. Then the door opened. My mother walked in first. Her posture was perfect, her expression carefully controlled. Anyone looking at her would see confidence, authority. But I knew her well enough to notice the tension in her shoulders. My father followed behind her, quieter than usual. His eyes scanned the room nervously before settling on the floor. Lily came last. She looked confused, concerned. She hadn't been told everything yet. "Dad," my mother began immediately, her voice sharp beneath its polite surface. "What is the meaning of this? You made it sound urgent." Grandpa didn't respond. Instead, Mr. Collins stepped forward. He placed a thick stack of documents in the center of the table. The sound echoed through the room, heavy, unavoidable. My mother's eyes flickered downward. My father's breathing grew shallow. "These," Collins said calmly, "her financial records connected to the trust fund established for Clare Monroe." The word trust fund seemed to hit my mother like a physical force. She straightened slightly. "I'm sure there's some misunderstanding," she said quickly. Collins didn't react. "There is no misunderstanding." He opened the file and began reading. Over the course of 25 years, funds were withdrawn and used for mortgage payments, property renovations, private tuition, personal expenses, and multiple luxury purchases. Each sentence landed harder than the last. Lily's face went pale. My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. My mother's calm expression began to crack. "These transactions," Collins continued, "were authorized and approved by Elaine Monroe and Daniel Monroe." Silence swallowed the room. My mother finally looked at me, not with guilt, not with apology, but with calculation. "Claire," she said carefully, "this was done for the family." The word stunned me. For the family. I let out a small, disbelieving breath. "For the family," I repeated quietly. My voice didn't shake anymore. When my car broke down and I asked for help, was that for the family?" She didn't answer. "When I worked 2 jobs just to afford rent, was that for the family?" My father closed his eyes. My mother's composure began slipping. "We always intended to replace it," she said quickly. "When?" I asked. She hesitated. That hesitation told me everything. "Not soon. Not ever." My grandfather leaned forward, his voice colder than I had ever heard it. "You were trusted to protect her," he said. "Instead, you used her." My father looked at me then. For the first time, I saw something in his expression. Not authority, not control. Fear. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet daughter anymore. I was the one holding the truth. And they were the ones with nowhere left to hide. But what happened next would shatter the last illusion holding our family together. The room felt smaller with every breath. No one moved. No one spoke. The truth sat between us, heavier than any words could carry. My mother was the first to recover. She straightened her posture, lifting her chin as if confidence alone could erase what had already been exposed. "You're making this sound worse than it is," she said, her voice tight. "We didn't steal anything. We managed it. We made decisions for the good of everyone." Her words were precise, controlled, practiced, but they didn't work anymore, for everyone. I repeated quietly. My hands rested on the table, steady. "Did that include me?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. My father finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Wine never meant to hurt you." I turned toward him slowly. "But you did," I said. It wasn't an accusation. It was a fact. He looked down, unable to meet my eyes. For years, I had believed his silence meant neutrality, peacekeeping. Now I understood what it really was. Permission. Permission for it to continue. Beside him, Lily looked like she might fall apart completely. You used her money, she whispered, her voice trembling. For my apartment? For school? My mother reached for her hand immediately. We did what was necessary to give you opportunities. Lily pulled her hand away. Her expression shifted from confusion to something else. Guilt. I didn't know, she said, looking at me, and for the first time, I believed her. She had lived inside the same illusion. Just from the other side out Mr. Collins slid another document across the table toward my grandfather. He reviewed it briefly, then nodded. It's done, he said. My mother's eyes snapped toward him. What is done? Grandpa looked directly at her. I've removed your authority over Claire's trust. The words landed like a hammer. Her face drained of color. You can't do that, she said quickly. I already have. My father leaned forward suddenly. Please, he said, desperation creeping into his voice. We can fix this. We can make arrangements. Arrangements. Like this was a scheduling error, like this was temporary. My grandfather didn't react. This was never yours to use, he said. My mother's composure shattered completely. Her breathing became uneven. You don't understand, she said, her voice rising. We had responsibilities. We had a family to maintain. Appearances matter. Stability matters. I stared at her, finally seeing clearly. This had never been about survival. It had been about image, about control, about choosing who mattered more. And it had never been me. Collins placed a pen in front of me. This document transfers full control of the remaining assets to you, he said calmly. Effective immediately. The pen looked ordinary, small, simple, but I knew what it represented. Truth, freedom, finality. My mother's voice broke. Claire, please, she said. I looked at her, really looked at her. For years, I had chased her approval, her affection, her acknowledgement. Now, all I saw was someone who had built her life on something that was never hers. And she was afraid, afraid of losing control, afraid of consequences, afraid of me. Slowly, I picked up the pen. My hand didn't shake. I signed my name. The sound of the pen against paper echoed louder than anything else in the room. It was done. My father leaned back in his chair, defeated. My mother stared at the signature, as if refusing to accept it was real. Lily covered her mouth, tears filling her eyes. In that moment, something irreversible had happened, not just legally, emotionally. The illusion was gone. The version of my family I had spent my entire life trying to preserve no longer existed. And deep down, I knew this was only the beginning. Because losing the money wasn't what scared them most. It was losing control over me. When the meeting ended, no one spoke. Chairs shifted. Papers were gathered. The quiet movements of people avoiding the weight of what had just happened. My parents walked out first. My father moved like someone carrying something invisible, but unbearably heavy. His shoulders, once steady and dependable, now seemed fragile. My mother was different. She wasn't fragile. She was unraveling. Her steps were uneven, her breathing shallow, as if the world she had carefully constructed was collapsing around her. She didn't look at me as she passed. She couldn't. For the first time in my life, she had nothing left to control. Lily stayed behind. She stood near the door, her hands wrapped tightly around her purse. I didn't know, she said again softly. Her voice carried something unfamiliar. Not defensiveness, not entitlement, just truth. I nodded. I believe you? And I did. She had been given everything, but she had also been shaped by the same people. The difference was, I had been denied, and denial had forced me to see reality sooner. She hesitated, like she wanted to say more, like she wanted to fix something that couldn't be repaired with words alone. But eventually, she left too, and just like that, the room was quiet. Only my grandfather and I remained. He looked older than he had a week ago. Not weaker, just tired. I'm sorry, he said. The words surprised me. You have nothing to apologize for, I replied. He looked at me carefully. I should have checked sooner. Maybe. But it didn't matter anymore. Because now I knowing everything da now das dao dao out dao ast out da da dao out dao 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 out. The weeks that followed felt unreal. Legal transfers were completed. Accounts were secured. The remaining trust was placed fully under my control. For the first time in my life, my future belonged to me, not as a promise, but as reality. I didn't buy anything extravagant. I didn't chase luxury. Instead, I chose something simpler, freedom. I moved into a modest condo overlooking the water. It wasn't massive or flashy, but it was mine. Every corner, every wall, every quiet moment mine. The first night I slept there, I didn't feel triumph. I felt release. Release from years of confusion, years of believing I wasn't enough, years of thinking struggle was simply my destiny. It hadn't been destiny. It hadn't been deception. But deception only has power until it's exposed. After that, it becomes nothing more than a lesson. My relationship with my parents never returned to what it was. Some things don't heal, and maybe they aren't supposed to. Distance wasn't punishment. It was protection, for myself, for my peace. My grandfather visited often. We would sit by the window, watching the water in silence. He didn't offer advice anymore. He didn't need to. He had already given me the one thing that mattered most. The truth. And truth, once seen, cannot be unseen. For most of my life I believed being quiet kept the peace. I believed endurance was strength. I believed survival was enough. But I know better now. Strength isn't staying silent when you're being erased. Strength is choosing yourself when no one else does. Strength is walking away from the lie, even when it means walking alone. Because sometimes, losing the family you thought you had is the only way to finally find yourself. And what I didn't realize then was that this wasn't the end of my story. It was the first time I was truly free.